embraced the idea of podcasting. I'd never done any podcasts until 2020. I embraced the idea of Zoom. I would have fired you in February if you wanted to do remote work, but by the end of March, it was mandatory. So
Yeah.
it's like 10 years or 20 years of innovation or evolution, all coming in a week or 2 weeks. Then I thought, well, what am I going to do with this money? I either got to give it back to the shareholders, and decapitalize. And if I decapitalize, I thought that's a fast death, right? Our company was looking at a fast death, a slow death, or do something new. And I wasn't interested in the fast death. The slow death didn't have a lot of appeal. Just get chipped away at by big tech companies. And so it's kind of a desperate moment, a moment of truth where you have to make a decision and take a risk. And so we looked around and we said, well, what do we need right now? Well, we need a hard asset that is scarce, that people all want in the world, and we need to get on top of the next big tech trend. Like is it digital relationships? Is it digital books? Is it digital photographs? Well, it's too late to jump on top of Apple, Amazon, and Google and Facebook. You had to hit them and invest in them in 2010, 2012. I said, what's the next big thing? And I thought, what about Facebook for money? What if someone actually invented a bank for that 1 billion people, or in this case, 8 billion people needed, that ran on the internet, that actually had an asset which no government could debase, which every wealthy investor wants, which you could move at the speed of light, that you could program into an iPhone? What is this? Digital gold, digital capital, digital property. What if the next wave is the digital transformation of money, of property, of energy, of all these ideas? They weren't transformed in the first internet wave. And I looked around and I thought, well, that feels like crypto gold to me. And so what if I could create something that was better than gold? It had none of the defects of gold, and it offered the promise of sound money to 8 billion people. And then I could combine that with a digital network like Google, like Android, or like iOS, or like the internet. That struck me as being the next big idea. And so MicroStrategy became the first public company to buy Bitcoin. And we bought $250 million of Bitcoin in August of 2020. And no one had ever made such a large commitment to this scary, new, crazy crypto idea.
Were you worried about volatility at the time, that you could make that investment and have it drop by 80-90% in a year?
Yeah, I was worried about volatility. And the way that we dealt with that was, we had 500 million in capital. I wasn't worried that it would drop and we would panic sell it. I was worried that it would drop and our shareholders would have a big issue with it and we might get sued. Right?
Yeah.
And so the way we dealt with it was, we announced that we were going to do a $250 million stock buyback at a premium. We call it Dutch auction. And we paired it with a $250 million Bitcoin purchase. And we allowed all of our shareholders to get out. Like if you didn't buy into the Bitcoin strategy, you could tender your shares back to the company at a premium. That rotated our shareholder base, and we didn't have neutral or indifferent shareholders. We had all pro Bitcoin shareholders. And that changed the dynamic of the company. It turned out that that Dutch auction resulted in only about $60 million of shares being tendered. So we had 175 million left at the end of the Dutch auction period, 20 days later.
Yeah.
And we bought another 175 million of Bitcoin. And then we had 425. So at this point, no one in the world, I think the largest public company might have had $1 or $2 million of Bitcoin before that. And we come over the top with 425 million. And we declared to the world that we thought this was going to be our primary treasury reserve asset, right? This is the way we're going to run our treasury. And that was a brand new idea. There's 43,000 public companies. And we were the first one to say, let's not put your capital in bonds or cash, or just give it away. Let's invest the capital in this new liquid asset, and this crypto asset called Bitcoin. When we did that, the stock doubled, and we raised another $650 million. And then the stock went up again, and we raised $1 billion. And we raised $1 billion about 6 months after this initiative in a convertible debt offering at 0% interest. So we borrowed $1 billion at 0% interest for about 6 years, I think.
Yeah.
And we went to buy Bitcoin with it. So at that point, we had said, not only do we think we're going to invest our free cash in Bitcoin, we're going to go ahead and we're going to borrow money to buy Bitcoin. And while we were doing it, other public companies like Square and then Tesla started buying Bitcoin. And then all these Bitcoin miners came public. And so from 2020 to 2024, that was the crazy years of uncertainty. People weren't sure, will Bitcoin be banned? Will it be copied? Will it be hacked? Is it a long-term thing? The skeptics thought, well, maybe, some people, the deniers said it's just tulip bulbs. Other people, skeptics, said, oh yeah, it's really good. It's better than gold, but it's too good to be true. And so the government's going to take it away from you. And at one point, China banned Bitcoin mining, and that created a crisis. And then they banned Bitcoin trading, and that created a crisis. So a lot of uncertainty there. But our belief was Bitcoin is the solution to 8 billion people's problem. It's the solution to 300 million companies' problem. It's the innovation, the biggest innovation in money or property rights in the history of the human race. It's like fire or electricity, right? It's this new monetary protocol which is going to elevate humanity to new levels. So we became obviously very big advocates. We raised $500 million in a senior debt issue to buy more Bitcoin. Then we sold $1 billion of equity to buy Bitcoin. Then we sold another, then we borrowed money against Bitcoin to buy Bitcoin. Then we issued more equity to buy Bitcoin. If you fast forward through the 4 years, as of today, since we started, we've invested $7.5 billion in Bitcoin, which is worth any given day 14 to 15 billion. The market cap of the company went from 1 billion to 30. The enterprise value of the company went from 600 million to more than 30. So, and the stock 10x. So during that time period, the company stock outperformed just about every stock on the S&P index. It outperformed NVIDIA and Tesla and Amazon and Apple and Google and Facebook. It outperformed Bitcoin itself. And it's not very often that you 10x a stock, 20x a market cap, 40x the enterprise value in 44 months. Right. So we took a particular position, which is Bitcoin is a good strategy. It's good for the world, and we're not going to be shaken. And while that was happening, obviously Bitcoin, when we bought it at 11,800, it crashed down into the 9,000. So we took like a $40 million hit in the first week or 2 weeks. So it was very stressful, losing 40 million of 250 million, right? It's a big thing, but we doubled down, and then Bitcoin rallied up. And it eventually went through the all-time highs and rallied to 66,000, then crashed down in the 40s, then rallied to the 66 again. And then this brutal crypto winter went from 66 all the way down to 16,000. Brutal. And then it rallied up. And so it is today where it is, and everybody's got their own Bitcoin journey, but MicroStrategy's Bitcoin journey is we started out of desperation. It was like, do this or maybe just shutter the company. We went from, desperate defensive to opportunistic. Hey, someone wants to give us $1.6 billion for nearly free for 6 years. If I offered you $1.6 billion for free for the next 6 years to invest in anything you wanted, would you take it?
Absolutely. We asked Dave Ramsey the exact same question. He said no, he wouldn't take it.
Crazy. Yeah. And you must not believe in anything, right? I mean, if you're in business and someone's offering you, in essence, free money to invest in your business for the next 6 years and you don't want it, well, what it really means is you've run out of ideas. You don't know what to do with the capital. But, we went from the first step to opportunistic, and then it became strategic. And we realized we are a Bitcoin development company. Our job is to issue securities and to engage in technology projects and advocacy and education in order to spread, the virtues of Bitcoin and the opportunities of Bitcoin to the world.
How were you able to develop an eye to spot innovation like that before the general public? Were you always like this, like growing up as a kid, to be able to spot trends?
But before we get into that, guys, I have learned so much about building businesses and entrepreneurship from the business experts we've had on this show. But if you're like me and you're always hungry for more, that's where I turn to our sponsor, Masterclass.
With Masterclass, you could learn from the best to become your best. In fact, Masterclass is the only streaming platform where you could learn and grow with over 200 of the world's best. For just $10 a month, an annual membership to Masterclass gets you unlimited access to every single instructor. Plus, you could access Masterclass on your phone, smart TV, computer, or even an audio mode. Like, you could learn to build a business with Mark Cuban, get world-class leadership training from Navy SEAL veteran Jocko Willink, or even take your cooking to the next level with Gordon Ramsay.
Matter of fact, James Clear, who wrote one of my favorite books of all time, Atomic Habits, has a class that teaches you how to build habits that stick. He actually taught me one of my favorite ideas I've ever heard, which is that we do not rise to the level of our goals, but we actually fall to the level of our systems. So he really emphasizes how important it is to have strong systems in place.
And the classes really make a difference. 88% of their members say that Masterclass has had a positive impact on their lives. And best of all, right now, our listeners get an additional 15% off any annual membership at masterclass.com/iced. That's 15% off at masterclass.com/iced. Masterclass.com/iced, the link down below in the description.
Thank you so much, Masterclass, for sponsoring this episode, and back to the podcast.
How were you able to develop an eye to spot innovation like that before the general public? Were you always like this, like growing up as a kid, to be able to spot trends?
I was a science fiction fanatic by the time I was in third grade. Like, I think my parents, they hacked me when I was in first grade. I had this comic book addiction, and they offered me a dime for every real book I read in some reading competition. And comic books cost 25 cents. And I calculated if I read 2.5 books, I could get a comic book. And so I read like 60, 70 books in the summer. And I'd be like reading one a day, and I got into science fiction, and I discovered all the great authors, Robert Heinlein, Isaac Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke. Got very interested in that. It led me to a bit of fantasy. I'm the kind of guy who played board games, simulation games. Before we had computers to simulate them on, we had to use dice, and then I played Dungeons and Dragons, and then that got me into fantasy, and all of that's about imagination. And one of the more famous books is Have Spacesuit Will Travel by Heinlein. And in the book, the hero discovers a spacesuit, fixes it up, it's broken, barking at the sky, a spaceship lands, he gets picked up, he gallivants across the universe, saves humanity from the bug-eyed monsters, comes back. And as his reward, he gets a full tuition scholarship to MIT. And I guess it's stuck in my mind, that if you're the upwardly mobile alpha male, tech forward thinker, maybe you want to go to MIT. So I went to MIT to study spaceship design, and I was going to be an astronaut and a spaceship designer. And that brought me in touch with some just extraordinary individuals, extraordinary professors, extraordinary students. Like, every one of my fraternity brothers was like an Eagle Scout, right? Like, okay, welcome. Like, everybody's a valedictorian, everybody's an Eagle Scout, and they're all brilliant. And what they do for fun, they design space equipment, or they hack the phone system, or the like. And while I was there studying aerospace engineering, I stumbled on the history of science. And the history of science is all about how did we discover immunology? How did we discover that the earth, revolves around the sun? Like, how do we get through the Copernican revolution? What's the significance of optics? Why do we stop bleeding people to death? What's the significance of nuclear power? What's the significance of Maxwell's equations, or Newtonian physics, or relativity? And, what did Madame Curie do for us? And how does the society react when you introduce a new technology, whether it's a railroad or an internal combustion engine or an airplane? And so if you look at the history of the world through a technology lens, right, then you start to see things differently. So when I came out of MIT, I had the science fiction background, I had the fantasy background, I had the history of, I always loved history in general, but then the history of science really opened up my eyes to paradigm shifts. I mean, one of the most basic principles of science is the paradigm shift. Dr. Harvey is the guy that discovered that the heart beats blood out through the arteries. It circulates back through the veins. For 10,000 years, no doctor knew what the heart did, and they didn't actually accept circulation. Harvey discovers it, and everybody in the medical profession rejects it. Like, no, we don't believe you. Now, despite the fact they could probably determine this with some experiments, but they don't believe him. And Harvey says, no physician over the age of 40 will ever believe me, ever. Right. And then I think Max Planck had a quote. He goes, science advances one death at a time. And Thomas Kuhn says in The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, when you come up with a new paradigm shift, whether it's, the Copernican revolution, right? The universe doesn't revolve around the Earth. Your diseases aren't caused by spirits and demons, but rather by little germs and, in the blood. Or relativity that Einstein put forward, in the paradigm shift of quantum physics, which Einstein rejected, or, quantum uncertainty. Kuhn says these paradigm shifts take place only after the old guard dies or in a war. There are only two ways you get people to turn the world upside down and see a new idea. You have to see the old guard die. We're seeing this in crypto right now. I mean, I go around and I'll meet people and they'll say, yeah, my son told me I needed to talk to you. It's like the 20-somethings, the 30-somethings, the teenagers, they all know. The 50-somethings, 60-somethings, 70-somethings, if they're hearing it from their kids. So this is a generational thing up. And I think, so I was fortunate because my advantage was I kind of had the academic grounding. I had the passion. I was always very interested in how do we invent new things with technology. I grew up in a coming of age where, there were 3 channels of broadcast television, and then in rapid succession, you got to where we are today. So obviously some people are a little bit more, what is the word?
Open-minded?
They've got more of a inclination, an intellectual inclination to appreciate that than others. So I always had a bias toward it. And I just had some really good formative experiences and opportunities in order to feed that inclination.
I'm curious, who were some of your biggest influences or like inspirations when you were younger that kind of like, I don't know, maybe made you think the way that you think? And as you elevate the financial ladder and you make this crazy decision, or controversial, I should say, to put hundreds of millions of dollars into Bitcoin to turn into billions of dollars, now that you have all of that money, who do you look to now for inspiration, and how has that changed?
The great science fiction writers, were inspirations. Heinlein in particular, not only is he a good science fiction writer and he tells a good story, but he's also libertarian. He's also a sound money advocate. So his writings are laced with conservative economics, practical observations about politics. Inspirational stories of improving humanity with technology. I think that's a very important formative experience. Reagan, Thatcher, they were very successful politicians in their day, and they both preached limited government, right? Power to the people. Ayn Rand and her books, Atlas Shrugged, The Fountainhead, very inspirational. Science historians, and the historians, Alvin Toffler, the people who are Megatrends, Future Shock, all those books that were, how is the world going to turn upside down? I thought that was very interesting, inspirational. And I think, Arthur C. Clarke's got a very famous statement. I put it on the back cover of my IPO prospectus in 1998 when the company came public. That's how important the phrase was. And his phrase was, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, right? And that was the mantra of the great science fiction writers, where it blends with fantasy. It's like, what's a magic mirror? Well, I look in the mirror and I talk, and then somebody talks back. Well, now you take, an iPad, or you take an Apple computer and you look at it and you Zoom to someone in Singapore and you talk and they talk back. And that's getting pretty magical. But then at the point where they take your photo and they plug you into an AI and they bring you to life and they put you into cyberspace, and I'm talking to an AI that's
Mhm.
talking back to me with your gestures. Am I talking to a demon, a witch, a demigod, a person? You know, where did the science stop? Where did the fantasy begin? And that inspired me to start MicroStrategy. And our idea was intelligence everywhere. Let's make everybody super intelligent. Like, think about what some of these AIs can do today. You can basically ask the thing to scan the entire body of human writing.
Mhm.
Give me a Shakespearean sonnet, but in the style of Eminem, and in 100 milliseconds or 500 milliseconds, it comes
You
back.
know what? Jack did that last night.
Yeah.
We said to ChatGPT, if we were to interview Michael Saylor, what should our format be? And my gosh, it gave us an outline that we would have probably spent an hour thinking of ourselves, and it did it in.
I would say probably more than an hour. It was pretty. I mean, we already had an outline.
we already
but we're
had an
I'm
outline,
just
yeah.
kind of curious what ChatGPT could provide, and it was good.
Was that
It was
did you
decent.
pray to your patron saint or your AI and your demon
We
or your
should've.
angel in cyberspace for the answer?
We
Well, my
should have,
point is,
yeah.
you kind of did, right? You actually, I asked 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, I asked God to guide me. In fantasy novels, God becomes gods.
Mhm.
I asked the God of my podcast to guide me, and this is what they said.
Mhm.
Right. And so where does fantasy, where does science end? I think it is extraordinary inspirational because it opens up your mind, right? It's like, what happens if I dematerialize every book that's ever been written and I can put it on an iPad? Okay, well, I just gave 100 million books to 8 billion people for a nickel. Okay. Well, that's interesting. That's not linear thinking, but that's like second order thinking. Third order thinking is,